please help me welcome Tim Shurr.
All right, everybody, welcome to the program. I have a very exciting guest with us today, JB Symons. This guy is amazing, and you're about to discover that as well. I remember sitting down with him, and he's a consultant and an author, and we were talking about building teams. And he said, well, I've been a member of the greatest team in the world, one of the greatest teams in the world. And I said, what's that? And he said, the Navy SEALs. And I went, whoa. Right, it grabbed my attention, and so he started sharing his story, and I thought this is a story that would benefit you as well, all the wisdom and experience. So JB is a Navy SEAL, and he was served his country for many years, and we can talk a little bit about that. And he also became a medic and a dentist and a pastor and a business consultant and a life coach, and I mean I remember saying, boy, you're an overachiever. And he said, you have a very low opinion of me. He says, I just achieve at a high level. And I was like, wow, that is awesome. All right. And so he just has a different viewpoint and a different way of looking at things that has created a lot of success. And that's why he's here. So JB, thanks so much for taking the time to be on our program today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yes.
By the way, you left out bartender. I was a bartender too.
Of course you were. Yes. And I'm sure other things as well. So that's funny. I think that, bartending, I was a bartender too. And I think it's a prerequisite if you're going to coach human beings for some reason. So yeah. So, all right. So let's jump right in. So give me a little synopsis, because you've had such an adventure in life already. And so if you can share a little bit of some of the highlights that you've been through in life and how it's got you to where you are today.
Fair enough. I was born in the manger near Muncie, Indiana. I'm just kidding. So.
Because there was no room in the inn.
I was born in Muncie and grew up on a farm. It's just about 12 miles east of Muncie. Mm-hmm. And started working when I was 8 years old. Mm-hmm. So I established an early pattern of responsibility, and I never leaned on a fence post and wished for a crop. And you got to get in the field and make things happen. And so I've carried that thought and philosophy with me forever. Mm-hmm. I was very successful in school and I was a three sport athlete. But I got a full ride academic scholarship and decided to go to Ball State so I could commute, wasn't that far away. Ball State and I got into a little issue about what they wanted to do with my money. I wanted physics, and I was on a pre-med, pre-dent program. I wanted chemistry and biology and those kind of things, and they wanted me to take music appreciation, art appreciation. And I said, I've played the piano since I was 5 years old. I can play every brass instrument except the trombone. My brother plays that. So I appreciate music. And I'll be darned if they couldn't ask questions that I couldn't answer when it was time to take the test. So that kept going on and on and on. They encouraged me to either go on probation or leave. And so I talked to my dad, and I said, if the Navy can guarantee me training in medicine and dentistry, I'll take that. And they did. In writing, I was one of the first two people ever trained as a Navy corpsman and as a Navy dental tech. So that now 10 years ago, they started combining those two disciplines together. But in the late 60s, I was the first.
Wow. So
I was stationed in Kingsville, Texas. And every other day I worked in the medical department. Every other day I worked in the dental department. And all the doctors knew my aspirations. And so I got extra training and worked with the oral surgeon. Plus I worked in oral surgery and learned how to do a lot of, I put in miles and miles and miles of sutures and learned x-ray in both sides of the clinic area. And I would hold medical sick call and dental sick call, went on and on. So I put in for Vietnam, my first, second, third choice. And I got orders to a large tender in the North Atlantic. apparently someone in the Bureau of Personnel didn't have a globe, and I was 10,000 miles from where I wanted to be. And the chief really wanted to know, did I really want to go? And I said, well, I'm the 5th generation military in my family, and I don't care. Send me to the Marines, because the Marine Corps uses Navy corpsmen. And he was very complimentary. He'd been in 30 years, and was he said, if anything happens, I'd rather have you, close by me for a corpsman. I'll be right back. So after 30 years, that chief knew most of the people in Washington, D.C. He came back about an hour later and said, you've been recruited. Well, where am I going? He said, well, 30 days from now, you're going to be in Coronado. And I said, that's where the SEAL teams, at least the odd number of SEAL teams, train on the West Coast, and even in Little Creek. He said, yep, you've been recruited to the teams. You'll have to go through BUDS, which is basic underwater demolition for SEALs. And to make a long story interesting, about 250 of us showed up day one, and 53 of us finished 4.5 months later.
Wow.
And I was assigned to SEAL Team 1 and did 3 tours in Vietnam. And I've seen the worst that people can do to people in every fashion. One of the things I've said is that man is probably his most creative when it comes to trying to destroy another person, whether it's physically or emotionally, psychologically, whatever. I saw amazing creativity in the form of destruction. So when I was in Texas, I went to Texas A&I, cleaned up my cum a little bit, and after 5 years, I got out and I stayed in the reserve. I did 12 years total, and got accepted to dental school. My undergrad degrees in biology and chemistry, political science. I was going to do forensic dentistry. And one evening, you mentioned spirit before we got on this, so I had a little conversation with God. And this is just about 6 months after I could look in the mirror and like who I was. That's another component there, because there was a time when I looked in the mirror about a year before that, 2 years before that, and I wasn't particularly happy with what I saw. And
how did you find your way through that? Because I know a lot of guys didn't.
That's true. What prompted it was I had come in to resupply, come into Binh Tui, which is in the southern delta of Vietnam, and I heard a couple of guys talking about me that said, Symons is in. And one guy said, I know he's a scary guy. It's a lot safer to be his friend than his enemy. And I was incensed by that a little bit. I wanted to go around the corner and kind of confront them, but I decided there must be a reason why they're thinking that. And I went into a little building that housed some supplies, and just kind of walked around, paced back and forth, wondering what I need to do about that statement. There was a mirror on the wall, and I walked up to the mirror and I said, "Do you like you?" And the mirror said, "No." I said, "What are you going to do about that?" And the mirror said, "I don't have a clue." And so I had not prayed or cried for almost 5 years at this particular time. It was, I knew that I was really cold on the inside and just really mechanical in terms of, I was good at what I did.
Isn't that kind of necessary to be able to do your job in that situation? Yeah,
I think so. I'll get back to what one of the most valuable things I learned in the teams in terms of team building and trust, because I've never trusted people. I do trust people today, but never as much as I trusted when I was on the teams. It was absolutely remarkable. And there was a key component to help make that happen, and I'll share that in a minute. About a month or so after I looked in the mirror, I had this urge to at least talk to God a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine by the name of Steve Sauter, who was a Mormon and still is, and I've reconnected with Steve in the past 3 years. I went to him and said, I've got a request. He said, what's that? I said, I want you to pray for me. And he said, oh man, I've been praying for you ever since I met you. And so I said, thank you, smartass. And I said, I want you to pray that I can pray, because if I was God, I wouldn't listen to me. And that's just the way I felt. And he said, oh, okay. And so anyway, I'll fast forward this a tad bit. The commanding officer of our team went to me one day and said, you're getting kind of squirrely, so I'm going to give you 30 days free leave anywhere you want to go, plus 11 travel days. So I had 41 days to go anywhere I wanted. And I thought about going to Europe and looking at going to the places where my father had gone during World War II. And he'd actually sent me the list of things. And I thought, well, I wouldn't mind going home. And so I never told him I was coming. I just walked in the back door about 10 days later and surprised him. Wow. I actually, during that time, I went down to Quincy, Florida to say goodbye to a young lady who I'd met in Texas that had written to me every single day, every day of my tours. Wow. And I wanted to thank her for her care and tell her that she deserved someone better than I. So face to face. And I hadn't seen her for like 2.5 years or so. And so there had been some maturity occur during that time. And I decided to change my mind when I saw her. And said, how long are you staying? I said, well, maybe a few days instead of a couple hours. He said, oh, good. You can go to the revival this evening. I thought, oh my goodness. And I said, sure, we can do that. And I was very active in the church. I was growing up, very, very active. I was assistant piano player for our church too, not because I was good, because we only had 2 piano players. But I went to, there was literally 5,000 or 6,000 people in this auditorium. And a guy by the name of Ford Philpott came out and introduced himself, and he was a former Marine. He'd been a former hard drinking, hard living, hard fighting Marine. And I realized that this sounded familiar. And so I realized I was also sitting next to the person that was part of the answer to my prayer. I needed to be accountable to somebody, not just to myself, but accountability is one of the key components that I learned growing up on the farm, but also in the teams. And so here was a person that had, out of her own care for me, had brought me to this meeting. And so that thing, I kind of rededicated myself to becoming a better person. And it took a couple years, because literally less than 2 weeks after that, I was back in Vietnam. Wow. And so I went back 11 days early. Really? I told my dad, I said, I can't stand it here. I need to go someplace where I'm contributing. I said, this was during the protests and all those kind of things to the war. And I was more comfortable with my job as the doc, and being with people that I cared for and literally cared about me. So I went back early. My dad absolutely understood what I was doing. Didn't argue with me for a second. And so another year goes by and I came back. So got accepted. I finished undergrad in less than 2 years. And that's when that one evening, I was just trying to determine how I could be that better person and be a dentist. And I started to say maybe being couldn't say the word minister. It was really stuck and I lost the context. And for probably a minute or two, I was just, why can't I say this word? And I didn't suddenly realize that the context was be a minister. And I just exploded in not a happy way. I threw every unbreakable thing in the apartment that evening. And as soon as I said no, I was just in the shower of needles. I was just absolutely getting wrecked. And I had, I still run, but I used to do 5, 6, 7 miles a day. And after I come back, I'd shower. After every shower, I weigh myself. Well, I'd already done that evening. And so after 20 minutes raving and ranting, I threw myself on the couch and said, fine, we'll do it your way. And the pain stopped. I was drenched, just drenched. And I got up, took a shower, weighed myself, and I'd lost 8 pounds in 20 minutes.
Wow.
Whatever that was, whether it was God or the Spirit or, my conscience ripped me apart. So the next day I went down to my counselor and I changed I'm a senior. And so I'm going to change my major from pre-med, pre-dent to straight biology. He said, why are you doing that? I said, well, I'm going to be he said, excuse me, I'm going to be a minister. He came around the desk, gave me a hug, said, you'll be fantastic. I said, you don't even know who I am. So that whole thing happened probably 50 times the next day instead of 2 or 3 times a week. Wow. I went home and with no regrets whatsoever. Met my first wife. She passed away a few years ago. 2 weeks after that, and got accepted to seminary, and off we went. And so after that, most ministers, did that for 13 years. Most ministers do a lot of counseling, and I have to say that they're not good at it, a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So I got a master's in counseling and clinical psychology, along with my master's in divinity. And after a few years, one of my parishioners came to me and said, you really helped my family. And I said, I'm aware of that. And he said, could you do some team building for me? I said, well, I've been on the best teams in the world. Here's my expectations. And so I said, tell me exactly what you want, how you want it, and why you want it. I'll sign off on that. And if you don't get it, I'll give you money back or I'll work for free until you do. He said, a consultant that guarantees their work. I said, you warranty your product, I'll warranty mine. Done that for over 30 years, never had to give money back, never had to work extra without pay. And that's when I got my doctorate in organizational behavioral psychology. So I kind of tell people, Tim, that I'm a farm boy from Indiana that became a Navy SEAL, I became a pastor, became a psychologist. So I can kill you, I can bury you, and I can explain why I did
it. That's awesome and unnerving.
My son said, I'm glad I can outrun you, Dad. So
that's why everybody says it's better to have you on their side.
Yeah, maybe that may have been the croquet ball that went off the court the first time. So
yes.
One of the things I mentioned during that long story was that in the world of trust, I mentioned that word trust, mm-hmm. and also just underneath that component of trust is self-accountability. So if you think about putting a saddle on the horse, you trust it, and underneath that saddle is that extra saddle blanket that helps, make that thing a little more comfortable. That's the accountability. But what supports that trust? Trust does not exist by itself. Trust exists because of 3 legs: communication and cooperation and understanding. Communication, cooperation, and understanding supports that element of accountability, being accountability to those 3 legs, and then with that comes trust. And if any of those 3 legs are bent, spindled, or mutilated, then trust collapses. The 3-legged stool, it's going to collapse.
It was communication, understanding. What was the other one?
Cooperation.
Cooperation.
Yeah. A component of communication that really resonates with me is something that I learned in the teams, and that's called clarification or clarity. That when you're growing up in school, and the teacher would say to you, do you have any questions? You don't understand. You couldn't raise your hand because you didn't want to admit you didn't understand something. I don't want to look stupid in front of my peers. Well, what happened was that we we were taught, if you did not have, it wasn't a matter of understanding, it was a matter of clarity. Clarity comes from the instructor. So our instructors taught us, if you are unclear on something, you have the right to demand clarification. You say, Chief, Master Chief, whatever, I need some clarification here. So anytime we would get ready to go on an op, once we were out in country, I would say, I need some clarification. And the team never once criticized me or made fun of me. They immediately stopped and said, what do you need to know, Doc? And within a minute or two, I was clear on my responsibility, my contribution for this particular op. The next time it might be a radio man, might be the sniper, whomever. But it would happen fairly frequently that someone would ask for clarification. We stopped, we clarified it, communicated it. That advanced, obviously, the trust that we had with ourselves and with each other, and off we go. It's also one of the reasons why a small team of 4, sometimes 6, sometimes maybe a dozen spatial ops people can do more than maybe 50 or 3 or 4 or 5 times more than that we're confronted with. Our goal was not to be found, by the way. That's why we were called spooks, to go in someplace and come out and not be seen.
Wow.
Kind of like that. 20% of my time was in Cambodia, by the way. We were never there. I can admit that now. What happened is, since that time, I have taught elementary teachers. I volunteer at elementary schools a lot of times to teach stress management and conflict resolution, problem solving in the classroom. Just a quick aside here. The education system in the United States is the last feudal lord system in America. Is that it's a top-down kind of situation. Is that the folks in the trenches, the serfs, they really know what they're making the greatest contributions one-on-one with their little teams. And then as it goes up, the principals are under the thumb of superintendents, and superintendents are under the thumb of state superintendents, and they're under the thumb of the federal government. And that people are making rules for children that have no idea what's going on in those classrooms. And that's my quick aside, okay? But it's a feudal lord system. Mm-hmm. It's all about intimidation. And my wife was my new wife was a teacher for 42 years. And I worked in their classrooms and did other kind of things. So I volunteered to be in those classes that are facing I-STEP programs and those kind of things, and helping them to deal with the stress and the anxiety and some other kinds of relationship building in those classrooms, 4th and 5th, 6th graders. So that's where it needs to begin. And so I have taken that clarification, talk to the teachers to explain to the students that if they do not have clarity, or their word would be understanding, that they have the authority, they have the right to say, hey, teacher, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, I need some clarification on this topic or this subject or this issue. And the teacher would respond by saying, I'm glad you said that, let me clarify that for you. Immediately, the teachers would tell me that they started getting more and more questions, more requests for clarifications, because they weren't afraid to say, I'm unclear, because they knew it wasn't their fault. So I teach that in my consulting with companies now as well, because very frequently when you're working with entrepreneurs or people who are responsible for an authority of an organization, they make the assumption that when they give out the orders, we want to do this, that, chicken fat, that the people that they're talking with understand what their responsibility, what their role is going to be in that. And the subordinates, that could be as high as a senior vice president, they don't seem to have the authority to say, I'm unclear as to what's going on here. So, as you know, Tim, I wrote a book called Getting to Why. And that even the title came about because of one of my clients who had called me one day and said, I need for you to come and talk with me. I've got an issue. He was a CEO of a $450 million company, and he told me what he had done. And I said, I'll clean this up. Why did you do that? And he said, that's a great question. I said, well, I've made a lot of money asking that question. And I said, one of my goals is to help people get to why. And I had never quite said it that way before, so I always carry paper and pencil with me, and I wrote it down, getting to why. And the very next week, I was giving a small lecture to a networking group on what I do. And I said, instead of just telling you, I'll just show you. So I showed them a little bit of how to get to why. And my new best friend showed up and said, have you written that down? And I said, no, it's just rolling around in my head like a BB in a boxcar. So he said, I'll help you write it. And so 6 months later, I got the book. The why is the very first question that a 2-year-old is able and willing to ask. And the first 3 times, it really is, they need some clarification. Why are we doing this? And the second part of this, why me? And the response usually is because I told you so. Just shut up and do it. And I've actually seen 40, 50, 60-year-old supervisors saying those same bad parenting words, because that's the first introduction to bad management, is when a 2-year-old gets because I told you so, instead of clarification as to why we're doing this. On a personal basis, I remember I was about 6 years old, and we were going to go, my mom said, we're going to go see my grandmother Merle. And I said, oh man, I don't want to go. And I said, she always pinches my cheek and she smells like powder. And, and my mom said, well, I don't really want to go either, but it's the right thing to do. Oh, so it wasn't mom against me, it was mom and me against grandma. And I said, okay, I'll go, and I'll sacrifice his cheek because you don't want to go either, but it's the right thing to do, so let's go do the right thing. And that helped a lot too, to build my own sense of responsibility and accountability. What's the right thing to do here? And it goes to the heart of ethics. It goes to the heart of moral and beingness, of doing the right thing. And so when a child at age 2 or so says why, they're asking for clarification. And that in the companies and corporations, when they are sitting down and doing what's called strategic planning, easily 90% of the time, what they're looking at is tactics. They're establishing tactics. They've lost track of the strategy. Why are we doing this? And so the why in the world of war is to win the war. That's the strategy. The tactics is how we're going to do that. So tactics will change sometimes every minute, depending on the intensity. So, but the strategy never changes. We're going to win this thing. Sometimes you have to back off and come up with a new tactic in order to make that happen, but you don't lose track of that. And that in the world of business, what I like to call going backwards from perfect is it's a future pull process. You go out and you establish yourself, and you can do this as an individual. Don't think this is only corporation. Establish exactly what you want in every possible detail. There's 7 areas of your life. What do you want in those 7 areas? Because they all help work together on that. Each one contributes to the next component of your life. What do you want, and why do you want it? And as you put that together, and that might be 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, but then you back away from that, like with a rope, imaginary rope, and you're hanging on to it. Okay, now the winds of change are going to blow you all over the place, but you're still focused on that goal, that finish line in all 7 areas of your life. So if you add other people, it could be a spouse, but in the business, it could be a supervisor, manager, whatever it may be, so that when they come, they attach themselves to the rope also, and they help pull because they know their contribution. They know why we're doing this and what their contribution is. And so the flip side of that is, Tim, have you ever tried to push a rope? And I see that time and time again in individuals and families and corporations, because they're busy with tactics and not with strategies. And so what do you really want, and why do you really want it? Okay. Hope that makes sense.
So it makes perfect sense. So, okay. So, I have so many questions and things. I'm trying to hone it in a little bit. So if you're working with somebody, I've run into situations where like, there's 3 owners, right? Or 3 doctors, and 2 of them are really on board for developing and growing their people. And one of them is resistant. And we know why he's resistant, because it threatens his sense of ego or authority. And he likes to be a dictator. Yeah. So, what suggestions would you give to try to get through that person, or to be able to empower the other 2 leaders to cause that training to happen?
That's a question that I've seen in multiple areas. Okay, I've seen it in families. I've seen it in businesses as well. We'll focus on the business thing. It gets back to the why question: is that why do we want to do this kind of thing? And you hit exactly correct that if you've got 3 people, you got 3 different personalities. Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about behaviors. Behavior and personality are not the same thing. I can change my behavior, mm-hmm. but unless I have a severe blow to the head or I'm on drugs, I'm not going to change my personality. Mm-hmm. So the modification or the motivation for causing someone to change their behavior or ideas, the source of behaviors, is that there is a lack of understanding as to why we're doing that. Back to the why again. If you look at the process, what I call the cycle of change, and it's really a cycle of success, that a lot of times people will not have real clarification as to why they want something. And Maslow was probably the best at identifying the different levels of need. The top level being self-actualization, self-fulfillment. Mm-hmm. The person that you were describing is trapped in a much lower level of the Maslow hierarchy. They're trapped in the area of security. They're feeling insecure. They're feeling like some of their power and authority is going to be taken away. And they're self-indulgent, thinking that because of who they are and the title that they have, that's called self-actualization for them, that they control other people. And it's a false sense of security in many times. So walking through, people have a tendency, will always be faithful to their belief system. So when you're talking to someone about their behavior and about the results we want, a primordial question is, what do you believe in? Okay. Value clarification. What do you value? What do you want? Those is essentially right at the very beginning of the path to change. And so helping that person, helping that group understand what are the beliefs of the company, what are the beliefs of the individual that drive that, because you will only be faithful to what you believe in, Tim. Mm-hmm. And as a counselor and therapist, I'd had men and women come to me and say, I don't believe I would do such a thing. And I would say, we'll pick an easy one. They were unfaithful. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, yes, you do believe in that. Well, no, I don't. Yes, I do. No, I don't. And I said, yes, you do, or you would not have done it. At least temporarily, they set aside their belief system and created a new belief that because the way I feel and the circumstances around what's going on, I can change that belief for this reason, and I will be faithful to that belief. And I tell people, that if you feel guilty about something that you have done, I want you to celebrate, because the fact that you feel guilty about something indicates that you still have some moral and ethical fiber left to realize that that was the wrong thing to do. It was not the right thing to do. Back to my mom and grandma. So the next phase then, beyond what your beliefs are and then what you're going to be faithful to those beliefs, then what's next in that is where do you find yourself in terms of attitude? Because attitudes comes from your faithfulness. Okay. Now, if you think about a ship, I went aboard ship one time for a few days to do some medical and dental work, and I was up in the wheelhouse, and the captain says, "What's the attitude of the ship today?" And the quartermaster says, "Well, it's kind of surly today." And the captain says, "That's not what I was looking for." So, well, we're doing 270 degrees with a 5-degree port list and at 13 knots. So, which means we're going due west at 13 knots, which is like 15 miles an hour, and we have a 5-degree port, which is left list because of what was going on with the stores below decks. So if they wanted to continue to going, that was the attitude of the ship. If you wanted to continue to go in 270 degrees, which is due west, they'd have to compensate for that list. If not, if the twin screws in the back did not modify their push, you're going to go in a real long, slow left-hand turn, aren't you? Mm-hmm. So in the world of attitude, when you are wanting to go to a particular direction, and you know you're kind of leaning, if you watch, children are wonderful. If they don't believe in something, they're kind of sideways like this. Mm-hmm. So they can and the more they believe in something, the more that they'll kind of, we'll try that. But the more they don't believe in something, their belief system says, I'm going to run. Mm-hmm. Same thing is true in businesses, is in people and people on the floor, is that they're not committed and clear on what they're doing. Their attitude is really clear, then you will not be able to go 270 degrees because you've got to modify the attitude. From attitude comes behavior, because attitude is a thought process and behavior is an action process. Each one is thought, action, thought, action, thought, action. And if something good happens, back to the belief system, is that you feel good about it. Let's do that again. And you go through the same cycle. If something not so good happens, it modifies your belief system. And so that it's a cycle of change. What begins to happen? And you can apply that to almost literally anything. Like children are great educators. They don't realize that they're teaching parents how to parent. God knows I've learned a lot. And so that
well, when you open up in that way, and you're receptive to that, then yes. They absolutely do. I mean, everybody becomes a teacher for you. You start paying yes. attention to all the lessons. So
I've been blessed. Yes, I've had over 10,000 teachers in the folks that I've worked with in the trenches, and my preference has always been to embed myself in a company. It might be for a few weeks. For one company, I've been there with them for 18 years, helping mm-hmm. to hire all of their personnel in over 181 sites around the country. Another company I was with for 9 years, they had 7 divisions. I worked with 3 of those 7 divisions, helped them hire their plant managers, train all the supervisors, become intimately involved with them. I did weddings mm-hmm. with mm-hmm. them. I went to funerals, I counseled with their children sometimes. So we become a part of their environment. So I'm not just there to lecture, listen. It's all about implementation. If I can't see some time management being implemented, I can't see supervision being implemented, I can't see leadership being implemented, because Tim, the easiest way to test for leadership is look behind you. If no one's following you, you ain't leading.
Yeah, that's funny. That's good. I had said, made a post the other day that if you care about someone and you're not actively demonstrating it, you don't really care about them.
No.
So you have to see it in action. Well, let me ask you this then. So
Sure.
do you ever get scared?
I can tell you the last time I was afraid. It was my first helicopter crash. We were at 1,500 feet and we got hit. And at 1,500 feet, you look down over the nose of the helicopter, and that's where you're going to land. That's where you're going in. And it'll be less than a minute from 1,500 feet. You're going to hit that spot. As we were passing through, we knew we were crashing. It was rotating. And I was with a doctor, and he was losing his mind. He was just all over the place. And I grabbed him and set him down, and I said, it's going to be okay. Because somewhere at the very beginning of that, I'm sure that I probably sucked up part of the seat from my own test. All of a sudden, something came over me that said, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And I relaxed, and we rode that bird in, and all of a sudden we were up to our armpits, and we hit a rice paddy. And it was just crazy. 6 months, 7 months later, I went down with another bird, and wasn't so lucky. We bounced and flipped over, and the door gunner was killed, and it was just awful. But again, that's the last time I was actually afraid, is that I just believe that it's going to be okay in spite of awful things happening, having my wife die of cancer, having of mine killed, having my partner in one of my first businesses, we had to separate the business because of the problem he was having. We lost it. So the insurance company dropped us the first 3 months of my wife's illness, and so 2.5 years without a pocket. MRIs, I was in today's money, $500,000 in debt. I was never afraid that we were going to be okay. We're still alive. We're still cooking. We're still making decisions. Fear and doubt, Tim, have killed more people than any disease on the planet. I have been in the hospital and seen people who should have walked out who died. And I've seen people in the hospital who should have died who walked out. And I guarantee you that a major component of the differences of those two events was the fact of they had no doubt they were going to be okay. They had no fear of those issues. But fear immobilizes you. And you know the acronym, future events appearing real. Mm-hmm. That's what fear is. Mm-hmm. And a terrorist capitalizes on the fact that they can create that future event that you're going to die, or I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to do something that's going to be terrible, is that a terrorist works real hard at painting that picture so that you're frozen. You won't do anything to fight back that terror or that fear. If you think about one of the airplanes that went out in 9/11, when the men got up and charged, says they overcame their fear. They didn't care at that point. Is that they set the fear aside that we're going to do everything that we possibly can to prevent this from happening. Okay? Tragedies happened, but what we remember is that the overcoming of setting aside that fear, that immobilized element of things. I've seen a lot of businesses fail because people are just literally stuck. Just there, I've actually walked in to presidents' offices that are sitting in their president chair, and they are absolutely near a comatose state. They're stuck with fear. That they're failing, they can't make payroll, or they're thrashing around, near-death experiences. That's an awful long response to your question.
It's a very powerful response. And because I've talked a lot, about fear and how paralyzing it can be. And, the fear and the anxiety that I had struggled with for most of my life. And occasionally it will come up and take my breath away, which always surprises me because I'm always like, hey, I already dealt with this. I've already resolved this. I'm already beyond this, right? I teach people how to do this. And then I'm sitting there hyperventilating and having to go back to using my tools. So, I mean, it's very powerful to tell stories about almost dying in helicopter crashes and the mindset. And when, and just having something come over you that says it's going to be okay. But what about the person that says, I've never had that come over me? I've never had that feeling that it's going to be okay. And how do I deal with that when nobody around me is telling me it's going to be okay? And my senses are telling me that it's not going to be okay. And I feel like I'm lying to myself and I'm full of shit telling myself that everything's going to be okay. How do you deal with it then?
Your outstanding question, because the source of that begins at age 2. Is that what kind of empowerment were you giving? That when you said, I don't want to, was there clarification given to as to why it's going to be okay, what the contribution is going to be? The part of empowerment that you have some control over your destiny. I can do this and that, chicken fat. Now, you're going to be responsible for making your bed, okay? Even when I'm in a hotel room, I still make my bed because it was burned into my life. Make your bed. So that's an accountability kind of thing, is that sometimes overcoming fear, remember the other side of that's doubt, okay? Is that overcoming that comes with practice in terms of, I can do this. It may not be exactly to the level that you wanted, but you lived through it, for crying out loud. And that there's all cliches are couched in some reality. So that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's a cliche, but it has reality attached to it. So that as you experience in these moments of doubt and moments of potential fear, you live through it. And you look back and say, well, how did I do that? How did that happen? And instead of going back and kind of unpacking that a little bit, is that because we didn't see our way through it, okay? Is that we sit down and say, okay, we're going to do what got me here, and what new road, what new adjustment do I need to make in order to keep moving here? That in my life, my goal a lot of times is to run on a 4-lane highway instead of a 12-lane highway. I know I'm very blessed. I've got a lot of capabilities, and I'm easily distracted to try this, that, other kind of things. And those distractions sometimes, that's not where I need to go. It's just kind of fun for a while. So the goal is to say, going backward from perfect, what do I want 3, 4, 5 years from now? And I pull myself to that. And something's going to get in the way, because there's going to be other people, other situations, circumstances that are going to be there. So you anticipate what I call if-then, consequential thinking. I do mental aptitude personality testing. I think you know that. And I can, part of the test that I can offer is look at the person's level of consequential thinking. If then, if then, if then. How far into the future can you see the potential consequences of today's action? Going back to the SEAL teams, is that one of the things we learn and one of the things we practice, what were some of the things that could go wrong? If then, what are the consequences of this? What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Until it becomes automatic. And so that we're talking about some terrible things that happen, but you've been trained. What if? If this happened, then you do this. If this happened, then you do that. So
do you think that maybe part of overcoming the fear then is just knowing what to do and having that clarity of how to handle it in that situation, and then practicing it and drilling it?
Implementation, practice.
But clarity first. And I think that a lot of times people don't have the clarity of what to do instead because they're so caught up in the story of something bad is happening. They're not thinking about how to get rid of it. They're just caught up in that it's happening. Like the shark has bit my leg. Not how do I get the shark off? We're just terrorized that there's a shark on my leg.
Well, you also think about what if I see a shark or get bit by a shark, what do I do? And what you do is that you drop below the surface of the water and at all costs find the nose of that shark and punch it in the nose. That's where we're taught that. I mean, I have been chased by a shark, but never been bitten by a shark. So that's another story that I share with you. It requires a lot of alcohol.
Well, I think that could be arranged.
Back to your question is that there's going to be things that can potentially create fear or terror, which is another kind of fear. If you look up fear in the dictionary, you've got terror, you've got half a dozen other subsets that all come about with fear. You can't bury your head early enough by thinking, if you say, well, what if? And when you're a kid and you say, well, what if I do, what happens here? And your parent says, oh, don't worry about it, it won't happen. All right, instead of parents can say, let's sit down and talk about that. If that does happen, what do you think we should do? What do you think we can do? So we start looking at overcoming those potentials. And that's all they are. All fear is initially potential. And looking at, if this potentially happens, what do we do? If that doesn't work, what do you do? If that doesn't work, what do you do? If that doesn't work, what do you do? So you have consequential thinking. So you're not surprised by the events of today. A lot of times, the really great companies that have issues have thought through the consequences. They immediately make those adjustments because they have another plan, another strategy, because they haven't lost sight of their strategy. Another tactic, in order to achieve the strategy. That if you look at Amazon, didn't make any money for years, okay? But they continued to change and modify their tactics, and now they're part of the big 3 or 4 in terms of success stories. Apple being one, Google being one, Alphabet. If you look at what some of the successes behind that, almost every single one of them, Microsoft, Apple, had partnerships, people that they took with them that they trusted. Gates had a partner, almost invisible. Jobs had a partner. If you think about, look, who are the partners that the people that are out front, the spokesperson, always have a partner. I shouldn't say always. Most of the time, by far, the really successful ones have a partner that they can sit down with and talk with, and that partner has the authority to thump them on the end of the nose and says, what were you thinking? What are the consequences of that? And they start looking at strategies and the tactics. Do we want to change the strategy? No. All right, then we got to modify our tactics, because if this happens, if my child gets hurt, what do I do? Okay. What is the greatest fear of a parent? It is such a great fear we can't even articulate it, and that's the death of our child. Okay, we don't even want to think about it. That's a paralyzing thought, practically. So what do you do in order to help those children to stay alive? Is give them some consequential opportunities to think about if then. I've got a son and daughter, and they're different. It's not just the plumbing; the wiring's different too. So they were very, very different as they grew up. And so we're still very, very close. My daughter was a Navy corpsman. She went to Kuwait. And so she's 6th generation military in our family. So she came back with some PTSD and had some real issues. And so I had to face some of those fears that could potentially be there that, she damn near died. So she's recovered from all of that and living a really strong, wonderful life. But part of that had to do, I think, with the fact that she called for help. Mm-hmm. When she knew that all I'm left with is help me. Okay? And that I was one of the contributors to that help.
Yeah.
So, but all part of that early went well beyond that growing up. And I made a promise in my junior year in high school that I would never say "because I told you so" to my children. Mm-hmm. Because the teacher had asked, well, if you could change one thing about your parents, what would it be? And I thought maybe their address would be something. I thought, well, no. Mm-hmm. I wish they wouldn't say "because I told you so." So the teacher then said, will you make a promise not to do that? And I stood up in the class and I said, I will never say "I told you so" to my children. I have regretted that about 500,000 times. But one day I got the feedback. Benjamin was about 7, Sarah was 5, and he had been beating on her more than she deserved. And I said, Ben, don't do that. There's going to be certain consequences. If you continue to hit Sarah, then there are going to be consequences. Do you understand? Yes. Tell me what I said. I don't know. So I thought, clarification. Mm-hmm. So let me make it clear to you. Don't hit your sister. Do you understand? Yes. What did I say? I'm not sure. I said, okay, if you hit your sister, I'm hitting you. Now, is that clear? He said, yes. Don't hit Sarah. Got it. Took 3 steps on that. And one other time, Sarah was asking me, I told her to do something. She said, why? So I told her, here's why. And I remember the first 2 or 3 times is really why. And after that's a game. So why explain? Why explain? Ben's sitting there looking back and forth, and I'm starting to break out in a sweat because I'm running out of answers. Mm-hmm. Finally, after about a dozen times, Sarah said, why? Ben says, Sarah, you might as well do it because Dad has more answers than you have why. And she said, okay, and did it. He didn't realize he saved her life that day.
That's funny. Oh my God.
And so you extrapolate that to a guy on the shop floor someplace asking why we're doing this, and that a really great supervisor answers why. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the whole process.
I love it. And for people to have that thought clarification. I mean,
you're married, right?
Yes. Yes. And I have 2 kids. So
please notice that he answered that quickly. Yes. I'm married.
Yes, I did. Yes. Yeah. And I always think about with whether we're, I'm with a company. Yesterday I was with 2 different companies, and I was reminding them that the stuff that we do here is even in my book more essential to do at home, because how you are with your spouse, how you are with your kids will make a huge impact on you. And so to take what they're learning at work and take it home with them, so that you're wearing one hat everywhere you go, you're really looking at being more clear and owning the situation instead of you need to just get what I'm saying. No, I need to keep saying it or expressing it differently, not just loudly, but differently until it clicks for you. I mean, you've had so many gold nuggets. I have like pages of notes. I'm just writing here. So
it'll be a test later, Tim.
Yes. I think I'll be able to pass it. You're very good teacher. So very rarely do I sit this long without asking questions, but you've done such an amazing job of explaining so many different things. And I hope that people go back and listen to this over and over, because there are so many gold nuggets here about.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Yes. Well, you're very wise. And so you've shared so much of the things that you've been through and given us strategy and tactics, right? So knowing your why and working from perfect backwards. I love that. Right. And, all these characteristics that can help you to feel more secure and more successful at the same time. And, there's so much in here that's just so good. So,
let me share one more thing. Let me share one more thought with you.
Sure.
I've done over 350 weddings.
Wow.
And a little over 200 funerals. So I'm ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
When I don't do a wedding unless they have at least a minimum of 3 counseling sessions. And I do personality testing. So I show them how the wiring is different and help them celebrate the fact that the plumbing is different. Mm-hmm. And so I explain that arguing is healthy. Is that I've been expert witness, you may probably have in court, okay? Mm-hmm. And the judge says, present your argument. The judge isn't saying throw crap at each other and be mean to each other. But simply the argument, present your argument means present the facts as you perceive them to be. Mm. It's a paradigm shift, okay? Present the facts as you perceive them to be. So I explain that to the couple. Don't argue or present your facts in the kitchen because that's where creativity happens. Don't argue or present your facts as you perceive them to be in the living room. That's where it's called the living room, not in the bedroom, because rest and recreation happens in there. So where do you go? I said, you go in the bathroom. So that's where crap belongs. So you go, I'll meet you in the bathroom. And you present the facts that you perceive them to be. It's usually the smallest place in the house. Uh-huh. And you talk to each other. And you can't leave there until the paperwork's done. Okay. So when you're done understanding, and generally you're coming at an issue from 2 completely different directions, and it requires clarification to go, I didn't see that. Mm-hmm. I didn't see that. So when you're done, you flush the toilet symbolically, the issue goes away and you go back in the house and everything stays clean. I have received cards from couples that I have married saying, after about their first anniversary, we're spending a lot less time in the bathroom these days. It's the same thing is true on the shop floor. Let's say that there's an issue and it's bubbling up. And instead of standing there on the shop floor or whatever it may be, is that let's go in the restroom and talk about this. Seriously, that's where crap belongs. And you clarify what's going on. And you don't go to your office because you'll stand behind your desk. And so now the desk is between you and the person. Get on the same side with them, stand next to them, and you put the issue out in front of you so you're looking at it together and say, oh, okay, I didn't see that. Clarification. And that it works. When you're talking about the parenting stuff and the spouse stuff, there's 7 areas of life. And they all support each other. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes one of those areas gets really, really, really damaged. The death of the spouse is really an awful thing. Mm-hmm. And then the money, the finances, there's 2 areas of your life. Mm-hmm. And then the social stuff and your career stuff. And at least 5 out of the 7 areas of my life were just completely blown apart from this event. And the last time I looked, I couldn't prevent death. Okay. So that I don't walk on water. I don't hang the moon except on the weekend. So I couldn't stop it. I felt helpless because, you can just about fix anything, but you can't fix that. Mm-hmm. And so you live through it. And you say, why me, why them, and why not me? You don't know. It's part of that cycle of stuff. So what I go on with feeling wonderful that I had 15 years with a spectacular lady and not 50 years with someone that was an anchor. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean one to stabilize me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's that.
Yes, good. I was going to ask, now getting to why, this is your book, one of your books, you have many, But Getting to Why, I think, is the one that people should get immediately, because it helps you work from perfect backwards, and it helps you articulate what your perfect is and why it matters to you. How can people get a hold of that book, JB?
Well, it's available on Amazon. You can go on there, and there's 31 pages of worksheets at the back, so every chapter has an implementation component to it as well.
Nice.
And within the next couple of months, I put together a video on every chapter. I'm going to put that on YouTube, so you can actually go and see each chapter and how it was created, why it was created, and then what the implementation process as well. There's 22 chapters. We'll get that. So
what is your website so that people can go and sign up for your newsletter and make sure to get the links to those videos?
The website is gettingtowhy.com. And my other work URL is Lead to Great, LEAD. You heard of Good to Great. Well, this is Getting to Lead to Great, leadtogreat.com. And lots of details are there about the kind of training that I do and the kind of some of my history. And fun fact, I've delivered 3 children, none of which were mine. So
if you can do that, you can deliver leaders, and it's obvious that
it is a birth process. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. It certainly is. And sometimes you have to wash your hands afterwards, because
yes,
there's a lot that can go into it. But you have demonstrated the just enormous amount of wisdom and all the experiences that you have, and your ability to help people to take a look at themselves in a different way and find out what their why is, and through that help them to become great leaders, right? Teach them how to lead to great, and at home, at work, and in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I told my granddaughter a few days ago, she's 13, and I never want to be 13 again. And I said, do you like yourself? She said, well, she didn't understand the question. And I said, let me ask it differently. Do you love yourself? Not always. I said, I want you to do that every day. I said, let me tell you something, that your grandmother and I have told each other every single day that we love each other. And so my first wife, this is where this came from. I would say to her, she'd say to me, I love you. And I said, why? Why do you love me? And she hated that question. And she'd get off, she said, and she would encourage you this, that, and this, that. And then I said, okay, thank you. So one day I said, I love you, Vic. And she said, why? She thought she had me. I said, because I love me. And she goes, what? I said, do you understand how much I try to care about who I am and what I am? And she said, oh, everybody knows how much you like yourself. I said, oh, good. What if I told you I love you that much? And she said, that's a lot. I said, no, that's everything. I will fill myself up every day with taking care of who I am and what I am, and every day I will give it all to you. And then I'll fill myself back up, and I'll give it all to you. But if I don't love me, if I don't fill myself up every day, you get nothing. You get dust. So I'll continue to do this so you can get it all. And she goes, that's pretty good. So fill yourself up, Tim, every day. How's that?
Amen, Brother JB. Brother Symons. Amen. Oh my God. Wow. All right. So, wow, that was awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, wow, I'm like speechless. Whew. Okay.
Too many people have walked off an umbilical cord looking for someone to plug into. It ain't me.
Yeah. No, you got to plug into you and plug into him. And that's, yeah, that's it. JB?
You've been very kind.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. I mean, really, really good stuff. So everybody make sure that you get that book, Getting to Why. Visit JB's websites, gettingtowhy.com and Lead to Great, lead2great.com. That's LEAD, lead2great.com. And sign up for his newsletter and check out his courses and bring him to your companies and have him marry your family and, you know, all this, all the things that he does. And, so JB, thank you very much for being with us today. It really has been a privilege, and thank you for all of your service and everything you continue to do.
Be well. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And everybody else, thanks for listening to this podcast. And for more information, make sure you check out all our information at timshurr.com. Thanks so much. Apply what you've learned from JD today and make your life a sure success. Thanks, everybody.